What's up, pre-Chiro students? It's Dr. Ben again. And today we have a great guest, somebody who's always involved in communicating and educating prospective students, new students, current chiropractors, people that have been in the field, Dr. David Fletcher. Dr. David, can you get us started just by introducing yourself and sharing a little bit about what your background was before you became a chiropractor?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for inviting me. This is wonderful to have a reach out to those who are, entertaining the idea, especially of joining the ranks of this incredible healing profession. My background is I'm a mathematician, and I know that sort of sounds like it's about as far away as you could imagine that the model of choosing chiropractic would be. But truthfully, I was trained in logic, and I know that this seems like a bit of an odd journey, but when you look at what the logical choice is when you choose a healthcare profession, chiropractic stands out amongst itself. It becomes very obvious when you add the experience of going to a chiropractor that it is really one of the most logical ideas and or visionary approaches to healthcare, because it begins with this idea, Ben, that we all know, which is that health and life begins from above down, inside and out. And as a consequence of that, and that's not a sort of religiosity statement. I'm into the physics and into the mathematics, and I do that every day, and I'm in my daily life, which we'll talk about. It's logic because the outcomes that were associated with healthcare begin with this conceptual model, this construct that says you were born to succeed, not born to fail. Let's find out what's interfering with that process that is the natural and only appropriate way.
Mm-hmm. And something that I just want to touch on is oftentimes when people are making a buying decision, they're more emotionally driven, not
Yeah.
logically driven. And the MCAT and seeing your fellow peer students really busting their butt outside of class to prepare themselves to go to medical school, making sure their GPA is high. There's
Oh
just
yeah.
all of this. I don't want to call it competition, but there's like a healthy competition, sometimes very unhealthy in colleges. But what can we do as a profession to properly contextualize chiropractic so that not only is it a logical decision if they want to go and become a doctor of health and well-being and helping express life better, but also make it more of an emotional thing where they're really moving and racing towards this profession because it's just the place to be.
Yeah, that's a great concept. I don't know if you're familiar with Travis Corcoran, but
Mhm.
he used to be Travis and I are great friends. And one of the things that he has pushed forward recently is this principle of the trivium. And the trivium is really important when you start to understand the liberal arts as it ties into health and healing. And the trivium is an ancient process of taking knowledge, adding into it understanding, and then having an outcome, which is wisdom. And I know that's a little oblique for where we're talking about it, but the truth of it is that you have to make a very knowledgeable experience, but it's not all about the GPA. That's book learning.
Mhm.
And book learning is going to put you into a scale. And I guess it's important because you get a chance to hone with who you are and what your commitment levels are. And it doesn't hurt to have a bit of a competitive strategy to try and choose the path that's going to change the world. So I don't mind the idea that there's a competitive strategy to get in, but if you get lost in the idea that a healing art, and that's why I brought it forward to the liberal arts and the healing arts, are all about book knowledge, you're missing the point. In fact,
Mhm.
you may be well better suited, if that's your purpose and path, to choose a very much more didactic, outcome driven process like medicine. Medicine is really all about looking at statistical relevance of prescribing an outcome.
Mhm.
And chiropractic is not that. Chiropractic is really about this senescence that you get a chance to have a presence with the person there, and you want to be on that understanding version, not the knowledge version. And it's so critical that we gain learners into our profession who are dedicated to this passion play of understanding the human outcome, not simply the health outcome. That's my belief.
Mhm. No, I appreciate it. And this is going to be a bit of a nonlinear conversation because I want to just do some rapid fire. I really appreciate how you articulate just how chiropractic philosophy can be viewed and how the coherence of how we can live in resonance with chiropractic. Can you speak a little bit about some of the fundamental skills that a chiropractor needs to build within themselves? The way that I'm contextualizing this is that innate, you're building your inner state. I split that word into two, and state is an acronym for your inner scientist, your inner thinker, your inner artist, your inner teacher, and your inner entrepreneur. So I was wondering if we could go down the line really quick and you just reflect really quickly on how should somebody build their inner scientist as a chiropractor?
I think that the key word that pops up for me, Ben, is adventurous. I think that you have to have a desire to not be one of the herd, but to be an outsider looking towards what the future is. I think that's a critical element of being within chiropractic. You have to
Mm-hmm.
be forward thinking and not part of the herd.
Mm-hmm. And you just used the word thinking, but can you touch a little bit more on the philosophy and how to build your inner thinker as somebody who's becoming a chiropractor?
Well, it stems from that adventurous process. You have to have an open mind, but when you're thinking, you have to be able to run it through a value set, and your values have to be inspected. And so often, what we'll find is that we have been guided many times by the noise, and you use the term coherence, and the incoherence of what the media is pushing down to us, what political models are pushing down to us. So you have to be a critical thinker. You have to be self-responsible for where you believe your value sets are going to go. Your thinking will take you, you don't want to just have confirmational bias in everything you read. Oh, I'm listening to, and I don't really care which direction you're, liberal or conservative. Let me just say, because it's there, let's say towards the conservative side, listen, I believe everything that Fox News tells me. That's not critical thinking. That's being looked at in terms of confirmational bias. You're speaking, you're preaching to the choir, listening to the choir. What you need to do is have a value set that says, how do I evaluate that? And it begins long before chiropractic. In fact, I think it's really important. And this is the other thing I want to say, is that when you make a decision to be a chiropractor, you separate yourself from being a therapist, which is very easy to become. I think you come out of a massage background, don't you?
Yeah.
Which is holistic as anything. And yet you chose chiropractic because there's limitations in the direction that massage takes a person. Not so limited if that's all you want, but if you want more, then you become a doctor. And I know that it's titles and I know it's there, but there is a natural step forward that takes you out of only doing therapy-based outcomes when you choose to become a doctor, and especially a doctor of chiropractic.
Mm-hmm. And that just speaks to the teacher side of becoming a chiropractor.
Yeah.
How can you build yourself, your inner teacher, and becoming a chiropractor? Because you touched on a couple of things there of like preaching to the choir, listening to the choir, confirmational bias. So when I'm a pre-chiro student on a college campus and
Yeah.
everybody else is pre-med and pre-physical therapy, and I've already stepped outside the box, become an outsider, thinking differently, going on a different path than the rest of the herd, how can I step into my inner teacher and really relate to these other individuals to help bring them some awareness of chiropractic?
Well, I think that when you're talking about that cohort that's there, I think you have to look at the common language and not remain separated. There's a lot of, without losing your value set, there's a lot to be said about learning to speak a language that everyone listens to. And the language in pre-chiro and in early chiro, as it is in med and the other ones you mentioned, is science. I know that seems kind of crazy, but that's where people's heads are at, because they're filling themselves with knowledge, as in, unfortunately, many of the schools we have. They don't nurture the liberal arts side of things. What we have to do is be comfortable to have a certainty as to why we are doing what we do, but more importantly, why we chose what we chose. And I just, if I could share this for one moment, I was speaking to students this past weekend from Northwestern. And one of the interesting things I caught them, and it was interesting because they didn't know how to answer it specifically. I said, what did you choose not to be? You see, when you make a choice to become a chiro, it actually means that you made a conscious choice not to be something else.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to be really firm with that. And so they were like, what do you mean? And I said, well, by choosing chiropractic, it's a path that means that you're not going to become something else. So what was it? And sure enough, it was PT, meds, and the other healing or healthcare arts. So, it's interesting because I taught at CMCC, which my alma mater, Canadian Memorial, was really, believe it or not, at one time, pretty much a great healing arts school, if you would, in back in the early days. And it definitely is on the wrong side of that right now. And I left because there was no coherence there. But
Mhm.
it was interesting because one of the things that they did, and this is really important, is to look around when you're choosing a school and whatever else, is to look around at your peer group and see what they have come from. This is really important because 90% of CMCC right now, Ben, is, if not 95%, are kin grads. And kinesiology grads have one desire, and that is that to get into medicine, they didn't get there. So they're backfilling and falling into chiropractic. And
Mhm.
they are rabid to maintain the viewpoint that chiropractic is some only form of biomechanical outcome. So you
Mhm.
can't learn the healing art disciplines if you're trapped within a peer group and or a discipline in the school that doesn't match your value set.
Mhm. I just want to touch on a couple things. Number one is a passion that somebody has as they're entering a graduate
Yeah.
school education. And when I was a kinesiology student in my senior year, I looked around and we're in this independent study capstone project. About 99% of them are moving towards physical therapy. But just getting back to what you just said, I think a lot of it was unconscious, and they're unconsciously moving towards physical therapy, meaning that's what everybody else is doing. That's what I
Mhm.
was told is the right thing to do. So that's the direction I'm going. They don't really have a lot of real world experience. Like you said, the focus is on, oh, you did good in your classes. Your guidance counselor is going to tell you should probably consider physical therapy since you're a kinesiology major. I think that's a huge opportunity that we have right there to really reach out specifically to kinesiology students, because as you mentioned, 99% of them are the students that are at CMC right now, CMCC, and really make it our goal to reach them through chiropractic, not through this is a fallback option, but this is your primary choice.
Yeah, and I think the second dimension beyond knowledge, there's sort of three levels of learning. There's know that you know that you know, and the first level is educate, and the second level is experience. And I find it almost incomprehensible that when I speak to people who are choosing chiropractic, they've never been to a chiropractor. They've never even stepped in a chiropractic office, yet they chose to become a chiropractor. And that to me is really not a strong choice. You're going to be very disappointed if it doesn't have this wow factor, and you're going to spend 4 of the best years of your life, in the age group that you're in, to jump into something as it's like buying a penny stock. You have no idea where it's going to take you.
Mhm.
So I can't create the experience unless they want to come to the experience. I do
Mhm.
believe that we need to reach out, and it comes, as you said, long before they become choice driven to become chiropractors. It's really hard to change a kin student once he's in a school to believe that there's a duality in the path. Meaning it doesn't
Mhm.
have to be a duality because structure and function always meld. But the
Mhm.
truth of it is that they need to make a conscious decision. I mean, for goodness sakes, they're coming out of an undergraduate degree program in 99% of the cases. They should have had an ability to form their perspective. One of our closest family friends, a young woman who has grown up with us, came out of a biology background, and she consciously chose not to become a medical doctor, to become a chiropractor. My nephew, the other way around. They both interviewed, but they both had worked directly with me to understand the chiropractic model of how we practice, of how we
Mhm.
think, how we do it. I think it becomes critical that mentorship begins before you become a chiropractic student. And if people
Mhm.
are listening to this and wondering how the heck do I do it, call us up. We have a vast list of people on our in our directory of people that would open the doors and say, shadow me for an hour. Watch what a
Mhm.
chiropractor does.
And just to move into that, because the structure of the program is you develop your foundations, you explore chiropractic, and then you apply that theoretical with skill building training,
Yeah.
and then you move into the real world, and you're actually becoming an apprentice in this
Mhm.
apprenticeship model where you had just mentioned come shadow us for an hour. I think that that's important, but I think that there's more to it than can be actually seen, felt, experienced in 1 hour.
Oh,
So I'm
absolutely.
definitely trying to create structure, a framework that students feel equipped to go into an office, and also that that office is prepared to really introduce a student to as much as they can given the time constraints. And then after they have that real world experience or several experiences with a doc, like in your network, and I would love to talk about the technology you work with and the network that you
Sure.
have in a few minutes, that's when they feel empowered enough to go back and learn through leadership by starting their own pre-Chiro practice on their college campus to gain that real world experience of what it's like to show up in an unfamiliar environment or to produce material and share a message in an environment that's unfamiliar with chiropractic. Go to the administrators, go to the teachers, go to the students, help them better understand, the guidance counselors, why pre-Chiro was something that this student decided to dedicate and commit themselves to. And then finally is the capstone independent study, whatever you want to study pre-Chiro, Chiro related, as you're preparing for chiropractic school. So having a network like yours to support these students, if we have them, would be invaluable, as you can imagine, just because your offices are special. Can we talk about what makes your office network special, the docs that you work with and train?
Absolutely. My journey, it begins real quickly with my journey. So I graduated, as we said, and I then took a postdoctoral in sports and performance. That was my sort of dream, was to really work with high end athletes. And sure enough, I did, with Olympians and pros and everything else that go along with it. But at all times during the course of this learning evolution I had, I was dedicated to performance. I wasn't dedicated to functioning management of injuries. So I was always drawn to the nervous system. And as a function of the nervous system, it wasn't to look at the nervous system as something that was pathology based, it was about performance based. And so to try and tune, or you would say to maximize, is really the whole purpose of chiropractic, is to utilize the sequencing within the nervous system to optimize the expression of these gifts that we call life. And as a consequence of that, I spent a tremendous amount of my academic background, but also a tremendous amount of my practical background in understanding how we can be better decision makers as chiropractors as to how the performance is going. So I developed some significant technologies. It's been pretty significantly adopted in the chiropractic profession. We have, I think right now we're at 27 different countries, 27 or 28 different countries where chiropractors use this. We have thousands and thousands of offices around the world who utilize what is known as the insight scanning technology. And it's a technology which uses medical grade sensors to identify the firing sequence within the central nervous system. And just so that everybody understands, it's non-toxic, it's not radiation based or anything else. And that's one of the reasons it's so applicable to all the generations. So we scan entire families as they come in to understand if they have a nervous system that is impaired or influenced by a subluxation. And so the whole idea is that we create a network. So just by saying that, Ben, people who are from a kinesiology background can absolutely gain knowledge from what it is, but it will not be telling them the whole story, because they might be looking at muscle tone instead of looking at neurological tone.
Mhm.
But anybody can use the technology. But the people that we affiliate with are just what we talked about, the people that are dedicated to the healing arts, to looking at chiropractic as being something more dedicated to the human potential expression than simply health expression. And so, as I said, if you were to go and envision what we would call an insight scanning practice, you might walk in and see it full of children. You might walk in and see it full of not sick people. You wouldn't see a lot of people hampered by back pain alone. And that's everybody's invited into a CLA insight practice, because whether you have pain, you can also move towards performance. And that's the gift that we have. So we have this vast network. And what's really cool is that it's not a secret handshake network. It's chiropractic, meaning you don't have to. It's not some sidebar branch. These are people that are changing communities, have huge voluminous, and I think this is an important decision too, Ben. In the pre-chiro, you need to see that you're not making a decision that's going to impair your financial outcomes, or that you're going to be struggling in your life to follow an esoteric path. The practices that they would introduce themselves to are vibrant, are abundant, a lot of joy in them too. So it's a good cohort for them to take a look at.
Mm-hmm. One of the aspects of the inner state that we haven't gone over yet, and I'm going to apply it to what you just said, but is the inner entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And when you're an entrepreneur, you're really trying to communicate simply in a familiar way to somebody who you just met, or that you're trying to share chiropractic with, so that it becomes more familiar to them. It's obviously unfamiliar to them when you're meeting them. Can you talk about what this technology is doing for chiropractors to really reach and meet people where they're at?
Well, I think that people are, I mean, there's a couple of forces at play here. There's always been a group of people that were sort of antagonistic to medicine and wanted to look inside. And that was a small group of people, compared to the general public. And certainly during the COVID times, and certainly otherwise, people are starting to understand that they have a responsibility to take care of themselves, that the big brother called medicine really doesn't have all the answers. And so we've seen our practices just burst full of people. The type of people we attract are not necessarily the most, I mean, they do have a critical thinking aspect to them, but they're attracted to the idea that they can embrace this whole inner wisdom, this whole inner ability to express themselves. And that doesn't dismiss them from, doing yoga and doing nutrition and doing everything else, and even medicine. It's just that medicine becomes one of those things that becomes a necessary second thought versus a first thought. And so we see that our practitioners really look to assessing the nervous system as it relates to the spine, as it relates to the performance of the person, as their foundational element. In other words, a patient might come in and they may have a lot of symptomatology or pain-based, whatever else. That does not dismiss them, but we scan them to understand why the body is impaired in looking at solutions and recovery. And because it's a critical thinking, not just an emotional outcome, because it's critical thinking, now you can build a care plan that is strategic to not only say, how are you, but more importantly, look and see, how are you changing? And then you can have this next level. So I think that if you were to come into one of our network offices, if you will, you would see that there is a strategic plan for virtually every patient in there. And if you take a look at the most abundant, we're talking about the inner entrepreneur. If you want to look at a dental medical model that is more successful than anybody else on the planet, it's orthodontists. They absolutely know exactly what their decision tree is about. They know that they have a process that takes time to evolve, and they are so good at what they do that they invite people in. And I know that seems like a little bit of a sidebar, but I want everybody to get a feel for what it is. Orthodontists have no problem saying to people, look, it's not that you're sick, is that you have opportunity. And while you're having this opportunity, you have to invest in it. So it's going to be taking you anywhere from, 1 to 3 years to get the outcomes that we're in. And everybody does this. Thank you very much. Because they know that they're working with someone who has certainty. And so when you work with our doctors and they present care plans that are not about how you feel, which generally takes you through a subacute or acute model, but how do you function? The length of care plans really becomes much more dramatically organized over time. And these same people have a very hard time not continuing to be lifetime patients because they've seen the value of slip and check care, of looking further and farther forward.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, just hearing you talk about the details, we were talking about the inner entrepreneur, but I believe that actually also can relate to the inner artist. And, every chiropractor, I believe, is all of these things. But the inner artist of how you structure a care plan for somebody, how you relate to somebody, it can really be challenging, confusing to a new chiropractor, to somebody who's never been in a healing situation where you're helping guide somebody from one place to another. So I think that the technology has really helped simplify, organize, and make sense of what it looks like to go to a chiropractor for people. There is a diagnostic scan that people are used to getting, no matter what professional they go to, that really supports our message as well, which is adaptability with the HRV. Can you talk a little bit about what the HRV represents for somebody's life expression as being one of the main diagnostics in the CLA Insight?
Yeah, absolutely. And you brought it forward really nicely there because, I think that what you'll see is that you mentioned that early practitioner not having necessarily the confidence. Well, when you're looking at data and it's being presented in a very communicative way, it gives you the confidence to know that you can bridge a gap. That people don't come in and all the time and say, "Hey, I'm well, make me weller." They come in and say, "I need you, help me," and that's doctoring. And so heart rate variability is a couple of things. Number one, it's a non-spinal test, which is huge because you break the barrier immediately of chiropractic being of the spine. We need to draw them to the fact that chiropractic is of the person, of the innate, and of the nervous system. And so heart rate variability is also very well understood by the other professions. And actually now the public is very committed to it as well. They have Whoop, they have a whole bunch of Aura rings and everything else that's going on. But to get really good data, you have to have really good medical grade instruments, sort of in the same way of going to get an EKG. You wouldn't go to Walmart and have your EKG done. Well, chiropractic understands this intimate balance between the regulatory part of the nervous system, which is called the autonomic nervous system. And the autonomic nervous system is constantly striving to protect you and regulate you. And so most people are familiar with the principle of fight flight. This is a division of the nervous system called the sympathetic nervous system, which is activated by stress. But you can't live with your foot on the accelerator all the time. And so the wisdom of the body gifts us a second dimension or division of the nervous system called the parasympathetic nervous system. And it must be activated to put brakes on that runaway train. And if you don't do that, you end up being exhausted and worn out and completely living on the edge, which is going to burn you out very quickly, physiologically and otherwise. So the jewel of everything in healing, in the healing arts, is to be able to assess and to trigger a more dramatic response through the parasympathetic nervous system, and particularly what's called the vagal nerve. It just so happens that when we scan someone with heart rate variability through a chiropractic lens, and we add in other technologies that look at stress reactions or points within the spinal nervous system, we can build this remarkable approach that allows us to really give the person in front of us, also ourselves, the confidence to know that we are assessing the intimate balance, the adaptive reserve within that person by looking at their heart rate variability. And then we can localize it to a chiropractic outcome by looking at the spinal components of the neurology that are importing into this whole model. And that's what we do with our technology every day. And just, people might be going, well, what is this stuff? It's different sensors that we roll and or test within the spine. We assess to the diagnostic outcomes. And what really matters is that this is dynamic. It can be done in anywhere from 5 to 6 minutes for an entire scan, but the results are instantaneous. So the doctor can report to the patient, and there's a huge aha moment that says, great, you're on track. Oh, we better take a different path here. Oh, carry on. You're exactly where I want you to be. Let's keep moving. That's confidence.
Mm-hmm. And it seems as though the profession over the last 2 to 3 decades has really embraced this technology as the technology. If you're a chiropractor wanting to communicate clearly in an aligned way what it is that we do and how we do it, and actually help somebody understand that through a technology, this is like right in alignment. So this is a little bit of a curveball, but I love going on these little
Sure.
theoretical journey. So imagine pre-chiro becomes a real thing. It's a field of study that people around the world are embracing and committed to. And we start to gain access to these health centers on college campuses, which are known for being one of the most toxic environments in the world.
Sure.
And people are stressed out. They've got their foot on the sympathetic accelerator, runaway train, as you mentioned, around the clock. And now we start to actually scan students and we start to help them relate to the profession through this technology, because we have a presence within the campus health centers of chiropractors that know how to communicate, are using the technology. We've got hundreds of campuses around the world. We're educating the educated people of the world in a way that makes sense to them. So now they go out, they graduate, no matter what field they're in, they've gained an experience of maybe waking up hungover, going and getting scanned, getting adjusted, coming in a few days later, getting scanned again, or maybe a few weeks later. Maybe we scan them at the beginning of the semester, at the end of the semester. And the last point I just want to bring, if we really care about our incoming chiropractic students, we want to make sure their nervous system is functioning at the highest level as they enter chiropractic school, because both you and I know chiropractic school is one of the most stressful experiences of somebody's life as well.
Yeah, that is a brilliant dream. And I don't mean it as a dream. It's an outcome that is
Yeah.
very attainable if people are open to the idea of chiropractic being a viable worldwide profession that isn't parochial, that isn't just sort of, pushed in a corner and a backfill to society. And I think that I'm driven by that vision that you have. That really feels powerful to me. It's a reality, and I'm working right now with two new colleges within chiropractic. There's a new school in Australia, and they're now coming into their second year. So now they're starting to get into the clinical sciences more so than the didactic sciences. And we're opening up the Scottish school coming up in the end of this time, and I've been a founding partner in that. And in all of those, we now have donated and set up the clinics so that they would have introductory modeling towards the new students that are coming in. But what you're suggesting is to get them in pre-chiro long before they even make a chiropractic decision tree to understand how powerful we are. And I absolutely embrace that model. I think when I'm thinking back to it, I was in pre-med. Part of my mathematics modeling was that I was taking courses to get into medicine, and it was well known that you went into pre-med. And if you didn't make it, you just carried on with whatever your science discipline was or what have you. But it was distinctive that there was a role for pre-med. And if I can just be, more, I wouldn't say judgmental, but obviously I think there was a value because it was associated with critical thinkers, but I think it had a terrible outcome because it was too competitive, to come in. It was just, you didn't really want to be in that. I think a pre-chiro would be so powerful because already you're not making the decision to backfill a missed opportunity in their minds to medicine. You're choosing forward. It's great.
And we have to differentiate clearly that we have a more collaborative spirit for our incoming generation of chiropractic students to really change the narrative, which continues to be what I'm calling the biggest idea or the profession's main subluxation. This pre-chiro project is really aiming to adjust the profession by addressing the internal fragmentation that continues to perpetuate itself when students with no foundation and no experience enter into a chiropractic education at all these different schools that don't talk to each other. They're completely disconnected from chiropractic, some of them. And as a result, these students are judging each other for no reason. I only gained this experience because I came into chiropractic in the 11th hour, decided on a school for location, ended up at a more health science, medically oriented school, transferred to a more vitalistic school, recognized that my students at my previous school were never going to get access to the types of information that I had access to. And I just felt really sorry and upset about that. So this was 12 years ago. I've been working on this project for 12 years. It hasn't left me. It hasn't ever dwindled in its importance to me, because when I zoom out, and I'm a big picture thinker, that's the primary subluxation in the profession, is these incoming students who don't have any shared experiences. They don't know what chiropractic is. And as a result, this has been published by Christopher Kent and a number of other people. There's buyer's remorse within the education, that students are getting halfway through the program and they're either burnt out or they're not excited about the profession they chose, or they get out of school and they don't practice, or they get into practice and they can't make it in practice. And so this is an extremely big investment, time, money, energy, to have that continue to be the outcome. As you keep mentioning, we got to keep coming back to the outcomes. And there's nobody talking about what pre-chiro could do to really shift the entire profession into alignment, by making sure every incoming student has that passion that you talk about, that the docs in your offices have, so that they're filled up when they get to school. Even if boards breaks them down, even if their classes are a struggle, they are filled up inside because they've already seen what it's done for their peers in undergrad or before they got to school. They see how people in their college campuses are embracing chiropractic as a way just to adapt to how stressful college can be. But yeah, the exponential, so just to be transparent, yesterday I spoke to a student who's in clinic in New Zealand, and he's from Kuwait. His dream is to bring chiropractic to Kuwait, which is one of the richest countries, if not the richest country in the world, but also there's no chiropractic presence. How are you going to bring, for example, Scotland? How are you going to bring chiropractic to a new country when there's no preparatory training and educational framework that exists to magnetize their student body towards chiropractic and make it attractive? And this continues to be a big issue for me, a big gap, shall we say.
You bring up New Zealand, and I'm a active, not only supporter. I go and teach there at least 2 or 3 times a year if I'm allowed to travel. And so I have taught virtually every intern over the past 6 years, 7 years, longer, that has come out through New Zealand. And there's a couple of things. They have a vibrant pre-chiro relationship with Auckland University, and this is exactly what it is. And by the way, it doesn't stop there. Auckland University actually funds and supports the PhD programs for them coming out the other end. And so Heidi and Kelly Holt and those are products of this birth to process of your pre-chiro, chiro, and now postdoctoral process. And these are full PhDs, and Auckland U is a very strong university. So, by the time people are coming out of their high school, and this is a really good example, they're making decisions to go into pre-chiro, to go into chiro, to possibly practice or otherwise. And I think one of the joyful things, especially when you take a look at New Zealand, is that New Zealand is not what I refer to as the cohort of Somali warlords that are the other schools that are out there, where they're trying to promote themselves ahead of other schools and otherwise. New Zealand just does it really well. They have a very limited number of seats. There's 75 per year that you get a chance to go to. They have minimally 250 to 300 applicants for those 75 seats. So they're choosing not the smartest GP, or they're choosing the people that interview and have made the most dedicated approach. So guess what the outcome is? You get this joyful approach over 4 years. They never stop smiling there. Just that vitalistic model you described. And when they come out, they change the world in their communities. And Canada is a huge supporter of that. Kuwait obviously has one. It's an international school. So when you talk about it, I think that by the nature of this seeding process, you take the Margaret Mead. You never know how far one person will take a process. I think that you're going to find that chiropractic is a much more mature profession than even when you got into it. We were so immature back in my early days. But I think that this whole idea of pre-chiro or even going into a new country. Your alma mater goes to India, and tries to change a massive amount of it, and it's being embraced. I was trying to refer a patient into Mumbai. There are 6 chiropractors, I think, in Mumbai, and there's 30 million people there. So opportunity, if you want to put the inner entrepreneur hat on, We have a number of chiropractic offices in Singapore, in Hong Kong, in Shanghai, and these are massive, city world states. And the insight is starting to really capture the attention in these, because we see the numbers of people they're scanning. So
Mhm.
I think getting the right message in the right format is going to definitely be there.
One thing that I'll say, just as somebody who went through the process like you, is one thing that I really value as somebody who's trying to shape a better future for chiropractic students is that exchange of energy. I think a lot of the time students give so much, and they don't see what they're receiving. That they're obviously receiving experience, and they're receiving a great quality education. However, when we talk about financial reception for giving, I think that finding ways to compensate pre-chiro students, chiro students, and even professional chiropractors, um, even if it's not a lot of money, will drive a lot within them to recognize that, hey, this mission is not just that company or that seminar or that speaker, and the money doesn't just all go to one person or one organization, but it actually comes back to me for my efforts. And I think that we just need to do a better job of finding a way to get students to see that this mission they're a part of, and they can leave a legacy of their own if they want to, and that they'll be compensated for that. I really think that's a key piece that I'm not really sure how it plays out, but as a chiropractic student, I did a bunch of service trips to places like Mexico, Honduras, Colombia, and a couple of other places. And that wasn't about receiving money. That was about service. And I'm not saying that those types of scenarios are compensated, but it instills this weird exchange of value within the new graduate, where all they've done is been in service to people and never received money. I think that it's important that people get used to receiving money, is my point. And starting a pre-chiro club could be one way that they, open up a business bank account, and they work with individuals such as yourself to learn how to manage money in a new business. Obviously not a practice, but it's thought of like a practice. I'm just curious to get your thoughts on that.
Well, I think you bring up a number of very incredibly valuable things to explore. I absolutely believe this is that, and this should be the shame on you moment to schools, because you take a look at great schools like Harvard and the rest of it, and their alumni fund is worth billions of dollars. And you go into a chiropractic, college alumnus program, and they can barely buy donuts for anybody at a reception, is because no one graduating has this passion to preserve the relationship with the school or with the pre-chiro and otherwise. And I think that's a shame on you moment, because certainly I don't support CMCC, which is a terrible thing. I used to, but I certainly wouldn't, because they've changed their direction. However, that doesn't mean that we have a giving program within our personal family life, but also within our company family life, which is very dedicated to furthering the progression of the profession. And other individuals and others should be invited to participate in that growth. And even if the growth is pre-chiro, which makes a lot of sense, right? And so I think alumni should be challenged to say, pay it forward, but before you even get into chiropractic. That's not unreasonable. I think that there should be a giving program that isn't limited to saying, well, we want to buy a new wing for a school. If you're going to fund something, how about funding the intake of greater and better students? And that to me is a wise choice that administrators, and I use the term Somali warlords, they fight for what they think is a limited pool of applicants to come into their school.
Yeah.
It's so untrue. It's like I said with New Zealand, they're bursting at the seams to come into a great school. And you got to deliver when you're in the school too, though. You can't just take somebody's money and say, well, good luck when you leave. And, I'm sorry you spent a couple of $100,000 and 4 of the best years of your life. Here's your debt. And CMCC does this. And I know I'm bashing on it a little bit, but it's natural because you can name any number of colleges. We're getting, unsubstantiated numbers that 30 and 40% within the first 5 years no longer renew their licenses because there's no money to be made in being some low-end therapist as a chiropractor in a physiotherapy clinic. You might as well have stayed in kin and just carried on for 4 or 5 years. Yeah. It's so tragic.
Yeah, it is. It is. Well, anyway, I want to thank you so much for having like a really real conversation and just being transparent about chiropractic, what it represents. And if somebody's interested in becoming a chiropractor, I think they'll come away with some more clarity of just kind of what the flavor of being a true chiropractor can kind of feel like, look like. And obviously, I'm trying to build out a lot more structure so that people can feel supported all the way through the process. But yeah, no, thank you, Dr. David. You've definitely served as an inspiration. I was at the Epic Pediatrics Seminar a couple of years ago where Heidi Havoc, Kelly Holt, you were there. And also I've seen you at the Wave, and I've talked to you before as well. I have the subluxation station at the office. But anyway, thank you so much. Have a great day. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you too. And I'll this is not a shameless plug, insightcla.com. If people want to know what we're talking about, there's a really great website that they can go and just at least look at the things and listen to what we do. Thank you, Eric, for so much for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Take it easy.
All right, you too, man. Thank you.